Hello, everyone. Great times we live in these days, ain't it? Wonderful times. I would say that many of us are receiving vast amounts of knowledge, vast amounts of understanding. It's this kind of thing where, you know, the tougher things get, the more people try to make sense of things and the more they seek out knowledge, the more they seek out self improvement. And these are just the best times for, you know, seekers, knowledge seekers, philosophers, and so on and so forth to get all types of information, all types of back and forth between one another. I wanted to make a proposal today. Uh, Much more than a proposal, I suppose. It's a thought experiment as well. Something many of you may have thought about, and something that I'm pretty sure certain people would be quite upset about. But this is what it's all about. So, who's the GOAT? We all know who it is. It's Michael Jordan. I kid, but it's true. No, the GOAT is Lucifer, Satan, the Baphomet. We know the symbols. We know what they mean. Well, perhaps we don't. The thought experiment has everything to do with kind of like how many people would consider this uh, Gnostic text or Gnostic knowledge. Some people would say that it's just the underlying themes of what the Bible is all about. Probably not, because I suspect those who follow the Bible closely, at least by modern terms, or would be the most upset with this sort of thing. But with no more ado, I'm going to start with the idea, with the acknowledgement, and I'm very serious when I say this, that God does exist. And by God, I mean the Abrahamic God, Yahweh, capital G God, creator of the heavens and the earth, Alpha and Omega. I am that I am. You know the one. With knowledge that God does exist, who and or what is Lucifer? Satan, the goat god, known by many. Some that is worshipped by Satanists, some that are proposed to be worshipped that really aren't, as many Satanists don't believe in there's such a thing as Satan. They don't believe in heaven and hell. They believe that these are allegories, parables, truth in the form of stories. Who are we as men? We exist, we know things, as if existence itself is the sort of the thing that we've been wondering for, centuries, millennia. Or with the idea that the existence of God, and we acknowledge that God does exist, who is God? Hence my proposal. Is it possible that God exists in the sense that God himself and or the idea of God is a guide? a entity that exists to carry us through the, the life that we experience, the life that we know, perhaps the life that we want and that we do not want. In the Bible, Lucifer is known as this great angel who wanted to be like God, who wanted to be, in the same position of God. It is known as one of the stories that shows that arrogance and trying to be like God is one of the worst things you could possibly do. It's like, if not the worst sin that you could commit, and that is being like God or wanting to be like God or trying to reach the level of God. There are other ideas of what is the greatest sin. One in particular that I might cover in the future, and that is the idea that the worst thing you could do is give false testimony in the name of God. As an example, that you say, "Oh, God came to me and told me to tell you this, or told me that we should do this," being one of the worst sins you could commit. But let's keep on track. Lucifer, the light bearer, carrier of the light, very much related to and shown as being knowledge. It is of note, as we've spoken before, from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that a serpent, known as the deceiver, sometimes said to be Satan himself, though, that is something for the apologists. I won't get into it here. Says that if you have this knowledge, you will be like God. Well, what if having this knowledge is to become greater than God? There are many miracles in the Bible. You know them. And in my opinion, the greatest miracle in the Bible, and is seen in particular, I'm going to give two examples. That is the resurrection of Lazarus, as well as the resurrection of Christ himself, with the idea that God does exist. Christ himself also should exist as per this thought experiment. Christ was very clear. No one gets to God but through me. Of course, you have dissenters, disbelievers, people who have different ideas, as per the Muslims believe in differently. Some Jews do, and some Jews do not believe differently. Jesus himself, in some iterations, says that he himself is God as well as the Son of God. In any case, you can see throughout history, and I mean not history as we know it, at this point, who knows what is true and who is false? What is true and what is false? In all the books that we read and all the stories that we hear. But even if some of these things were false, the ideas are to remain the same. You have men and women who do amazing things that affect generations, multiple generations after them. People who were able to rally up, a few hundred people to a few thousand to millions to be able to do certain jobs, to be able to do great changes within their country, within their communities. Destroy people, destroy towns, cities, entire countries, as well as saving one another, saving and rescuing towns, cities, countries. It's, I guess they take as much as they give. The idea is having knowledge, knowing thyself, as they say, to be greater than God. It is very, very little mention to that. It's said that God is a jealous God in the Bible, that you should not worship anyone or anything else but God. Idolatry is one of the greatest sins. Is idolatry worse than, saying false things in the name of God? Is idolatry worse than wanting to be like God? Y'all can decide that for yourselves. I have no real answer to that one. I don't know. What I do know, however, with the idea that God does exist, and that us as human beings, as individuals, could become greater than God. Is that possible? For some, it's an easy answer. They'll say yes. They'll say, God is nothing more than a creation of man. It is a figment of our imagination. It is a, what is that word? Imaginary friend for adults. Some others would say that God exists as it exists within the collective consciousness of mankind. We believe in God, and God exists within our collective consciousness as we say that He exists, and that we say that He exists in each one of our minds, or at least those who believe in Him. In which case, those believers and those followers create God. Perhaps they are responsible for His being, even. What would happen if all believers in God were to vanish from this earth all of a sudden? Does God die along with them? Well, I would say that no, because to me, God is something other than that, but perhaps one day we'll get there. Wiz, the goat, the horn god? Well, you might get several answers, but for myself, for right now, I can say that it is I, the same way that it could be you or anyone else. Anybody that would say that God exists within themselves. Anybody that would say that they are aware of their existence, so much so that they know that they are part of the universe, that they know that they are moving along, they are existing just as the universe itself exists. The same way that cataclysm of energy, power, or lack thereof, or darkness or light exists within each one of ourselves. The universe inside of each one of our minds that allows us to dream, to create miracles within ourselves, so that even till this day, no one really knows what is consciousness to the point that what is our soul. Now, we could go to all types of elaborations on that. Some people say that when someone dies, that they instantly weigh less, as if a soul was to leave their body. There are explanations to that phenomenon, but we needn't go into it right now. Some would say that when we dream, are we just recalling things within our own mind? When we dream, Is it that all that we are doing inside of our dreams, do they not all exist? How can we say that our dreams do not exist and what we do within our dreams to the point that the things inside of our dreams themselves do not exist? Some of you may not know this as much, but you could have a dream in which you touch something, you smell something. It has heat, it has texture and characteristics of anything that you would touch in real life. What is the difference between this real life in which you feel all the same sensations through, our five senses and something within our dream that we experience the same five senses? Is it possible that Gnostic ideas, the poems that we as human beings have created throughout history, and today this atheistic pagan image of this goat being a great example of knowledge, resistance, rebellion, belief in oneself. To mention that these things might be seen as selfish, individualistic. Well, what would be the opposite of that? Is belief in God tantamount to collectivism? That's one of the things that many of you would have to deal with yourselves. You value individual responsibility. You value, individual traditions, yet at the same time might adhere to such collective ideas as to all be equal under the eyes of the Lord. Is one Christian equal to another, equal to a Muslim, or equal to a Jew? As per actually the Abrahamic gods alone, I suppose. But the question remains, who is the goat? Is the goat God? Or is the goat Lucifer, Satan himself, as depicted? It would have been a great feat, astonishing, I'd even say, for a being such as God to exist. For a lowly, as per the Bible, angel of arrogance and weakness when compared to God would even dare to stand up against him as if he did not know any better. Do we know any better?